How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Samach Zayin, Daf 67 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, exciting daf. Why is it an exciting daf? Wrapping up Elu Trefis. How exciting is that? Elu Trefis feels like another one of those Siyum Periks. You know, there's like a few Prakim and Shas that feels like when you finish them, you can make a Siyum. I remember Shnaim Ochazin fell that way. Hey, I think basically all of them were in Babble Metzia. What a special Masechta. Do you remember Babble Metzia? How much certainly I, but maybe we loved it. Wow, Babble Metzia, what a unique Masechta. It's been so long since then. It's been so long since Babble Metzia. But anyways, I remember I felt Babble Metzia, Shnaim Ochazin, Perek Hazov, Perek Ezu Neshech. I felt like those were prakim that you can make a siyum just on that perek. Anyways, I feel like I'm feeling similar vibes with Elu Trefis. Anyways, today is the final daf of Elu Trefis, which I think is very exciting. I think it's quite the accomplishment. So everybody, I think we should all be proud of ourselves and excited that we did it. We learned Elu Trefis. Wow, that's big. Feels big. Anyways, now on today's daf, it's kind of a technical daf, somewhat interesting, somewhat technical. Anyways, the first part of the daf is bugs in static water, which we began discussing yesterday. We talked about fins and scales, which is a requirement really in seas and streams and ponds and canyons, but not in pits, ditches, caves, and glasses of water. So we are going to kind of wrap up that discussion, move on to bugs in fruits and vegetables, which is a pretty interesting concept because it's kind of lamaisa, right? Whenever you buy dates at the shuk, you got to open them up and look for bugs. You find them. You find them. I'd say dates, I'd say roughly speaking, every time you buy dates, you'll find one with a bug. I'd say roughly speaking, not always, but sometimes you find more than one. So they're there. So you do have to look. Anyway, so we're gonna discuss that scenario in which we're gonna discuss that topic in which scenarios you have to be concerned about bugs that you find in fruits and when not. And finally, bugs in meat and fish. So I imagine that with our sensitivities, just like we discussed with the blood spots in the eggs, I think if we find, I imagine most of us, if we find a blood spot in our egg, we're not going to scoop it out and throw it in the garbage and eat the rest of the egg. I think we'd be kind of freaked out. I imagine that we'd feel similarly with bugs in our fruits or in our meat and our fish and our water. But al kopanim, we will nonetheless, right, Tori vilomod anu tzrichin, and we are going to discuss these topics and enjoy ourselves and learn Daf Samach Zayin, Daf 67 of Masechta Chullin, and wrap up the great perek of Elu Trefis. Friends, before we begin, I just want to give Hakoras hatov and to say thank you. The other day, someone reached out to me via email that he's not part of the WhatsApp group or anything, but he's been listening to Babble on Talmud for the past several months, since towards the end of Menachis and Chullin. Anyways, he just sent me an email and he was very thankful for Babble on Talmud, and he asked if he could support us and make a donation, and that was totally not necessary, but greatly appreciated. So I really just want to thank him, and he's on a very unique and special journey, and I just want to just bless him and wish him with all the possible success and more that he can realize in the future. So thank you so much. We love you. We're rooting for you. Let's go weiter. Friends, we begin on Daf Samach Zayin, Amid Aleph, about 10 or so lines before it gets wide. Okay, friends, this is the daf begins off. I feel like, oh boy, I feel like I need to sneeze, but I think sneeze averted. Al kopanim, the daf right. If you remember yesterday, there was a bit of a tricky technical. The daf starts off with like a bit of a technical few lines that we had discussed yesterday about a glass of water. If you have a glass of water and there might be some little bugs in that glass of water, and we had said that you can drink the glass of water even with the bugs because there is no requirement of fins and scales there, because the pasuk says that the requirement for fins and scales is in yomim and nechalim, in seas and streams, to the exclusion of glasses of water. No requirement for fins and scales there. Now, in that context, we had said that this comes up twice, right? First, when we say that you need to have, or you can only, if there are fins and scales, you are permitted to eat the fish in seas and streams. However, that does imply that in a glass of water, however, you don't need the fins and scales. Even without them, you could drink it. That was one pasuk where we learned that from. Then also, the pasukim right after that, which say that when there are no fins and scales, you can't eat it. So that, again, was in the context of seas and streams. But in the context of a glass of water, you can drink it, even though there are some bugs in there that have no fins and scales. Now, we said that so basically we learned this concept out of drinking the glass of water from those two verses. The verse of eating with fins and scales and don't eat without fins and scales. We said one of them is primary, one of them is explicit, and the other one is implicit. And we are now going to have a few lines where we discuss which is the explicit one and which is the implicit one. A little bit technical, but it's not much. Hey, Sasim Ve Mefurish, which is the implicit verse and which is the explicit verse? Pligi bar Rav Acha Ravina. There's a machlekes Rav Acha and Ravina. Of course, whenever there's a machlekes, I wouldn't say that this is necessarily relevant in this context, but however, just to remind us that whenever in the Gemara there's a machlekes Rav Acha and Ravina will be the more lenient opinion. Now again, I don't know if there's a more lenient opinion here, but just to remind ourselves of that Shas principle. Chad Omar yesh lo miforash ve'ein lo sasam. So one of them hold that the verse that says when there are fins and scales, eat it, that is the explicit source. The ein lo sasam, and the verse that says that when there are no fins and scales, don't eat it, that's the implicit verse. Mecharamar, and the other one says fakir, the opposite. Ein lo miforash, that when there are no fins and scales, don't eat it. That is the explicit verse from which we learn that in a glass, however, it doesn't matter if there are fins or scales. The yesh lo sasum, and when there are fins and scales, eat it. That is the implicit one. My time demand Omer yesh lo miforash. How come the opinion who says that the explicit verse is the one where it says that when there are fins and scales, you can eat it? Why is that the explicit verse? So amalach mine hu deka mishtru kalim. So it's a little bit subtle to even maybe elusive to understand exactly what this means, but because the verse that says that when there are fins and scales, eat the fish, that is, what does it say? Mine hu deka mishtru kalim. That is the verse from which we learn that it is permitted that in vessels you can drink even without fins and scales. Why? So Rashi explains, it's kind of a long Rashi, maybe because it's a little bit hard to quite put your finger on it, like 100%. But anyways, Rashi says, well, that verse says that osam tochelu, them you can eat. That when there are fins and scales, you eat them, to the exclusion of when there are no fins and scales, you don't eat them. And there it says yomim and nechalim, specifically seas and streams. Seas and streams is where we have this whole thing about eat it with fins and scales, don't eat without fins and scales. But in a glass, this whole discussion is irrelevant. Rashi also then continues and he says that also when it comes to the second verse of the when there are no fins and scales, don't eat it. Technically, when it says lo sochelu, there it's really closer to the mayim as opposed to the yamim and nechalim. If you look at the verse, it's like all kind of technical, right? The verse says, "V'chol asher ein lo snabe v'kaskes b'mayim." Where am I? But v'chol asher ein lo snabe v'kaskes b'yamim v'nechalim. So there it says b'yamim v'nechalim by the ein lo, right? So mikol sheretz hamayim. There it says mayim. Mikol nefesh achaya asher b'mayim. Right. So there you have the two mayims. And the Yom and Chalim was before then, and then only after that comes the Lo Socheda, so it's like kind of distance from the Yom and Chalim. Anyways, so therefore this, whether it's Ravach or Ravina, their opinion is that the primary source is really when coming from the verse of eat fish that have fins and scales. That's the primary one, and don't eat fish that don't have fins and scales is the implicit one. Okay, fine. My time demand the Omar dika ein lo miforish. What is how come the opinion who says that the verse that says that when there are no fins and scales, don't eat it? That's really the primary source for saying that when it's in a glass of water, however, it really doesn't matter that there are no fins and scales. I'll tell you why. In this one, I actually relate to a little better, which is why when I was learning the Gemara yesterday, I assumed that this was just simply the primary source. But the high, hu di kamuchach aha eich, the imea eich hava amino bekelim avgav de isle namilo seichel. If you remember yesterday, there was a havmin in the Gemara to say that when it comes to when the verse says, when there are fins and scales, you can eat it. So we had a havmin to say, well, maybe that means is that in streams and seas, when there are fins and scales, you're allowed to eat it. That's the only context in which you're allowed to eat water creatures. Is generally speaking, you're not allowed to eat water creatures. But in a sea or a stream, if there are fins and scales, you can eat that. However, in a glass, even if there are fins and scales, you can't eat it. So then the Gemara yesterday had said that, well, that can't be, because the other verse that says that when there are no fins and scales, you can't eat it, well, that says specifically in seas and streams, implying that in a glass, it doesn't really matter that there are no fins and scales. And we wanted to say yesterday that was definitive, and therefore, and that was that clearly, right? We learned from there that when there are no fins and scales in the seas and the streams, you can't eat it. But in a glass, you can eat it. So that is settled. In a glass, you can eat it. Don't tell me that in a glass, even when there are fins and scales, you can't eat it. No, in a glass, you can eat whatever's in there, even if there are no fins and scales. So we saw yesterday that really the definitive verse was the one about not eating the fins and scales. So therefore, this Amora says that that's really the explicit verse, and the first verse about eating those that have fins and scales is the implicit one. As I mentioned, this is a very technical few lines, but okay, we have kind of gone through that sugya about which is the explicit verse and which is the implicit one. Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, lo lishpe inish shichra b'tzavyasa be'urta, okay, duma parsh le'el m'tzavyasa v'hodar nofil l'chasa v'ava over mishum sheretz ashoretz alaretz. This is pretty interesting. So we have said that if you have a glass of water, and in that glass there are like bugs and stuff that originated in the water. They were born in the water or whatever, and they remained in the glass, or static waters in a pit or a ditch or a cave. So if you have static water and you have whatever water bugs were born in that water and they remained in that water, so we're saying that that technically speaking, you can consume them. There's no issue of sheretz ashoretz b'amoyim and requirement for fins and scales or anything like that. However, there is a concept of sheretz ashoretz ala oretz. Now, what that means is that if any of those bugs leave the glass of water or the pit or whatever and crawl around on the ground, well, then they become sheretz ashoretz ala oretz, and now there is a problem of consuming sheretz ashoretz ala oretz, a bug that was bugging around on the ground and crawling around on the ground. So here we have a scenario where you have somebody who has date beer, and apparently date beer could be kind of buggy. Maybe that's why we don't do it anymore. Who knows? but they had date beer, and they would filter the date beer, and the date beer they would have to filter using these like sticks and wood or whatever. And as you would filter it, so there would be bugs that would get filtered out. So the Gemara is saying, don't do this at night, because at night you can have some bugs that get filtered out into the filter, and it'll be crawling around there, which would be enough to make it sheretz hashoretz al aretz, and then it could fall back in to the beer, and you'll think, okay, nish gefährlich, this is just beer bugs, technically speaking. However, it's not just a beer bug, because it actually got stuck on the filter and was crawling around on the filter, which would be enough, on the wooden filter, which would be enough for it to be considered sheretz hashoretz al aretz, and it would actually be a problem. So only do it during the daytime when it's light out, and you can actually identify any stragglers, anything that gets filtered out, to make sure that it is not going to end up in the beer. So again, Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, lo lishpei inish shichra b'tzavyasa beorta, a person should not pour beer through a wooden filter at night where you can't see what's getting filtered out. Dilma parish le'el mitzavyasa, because you might have some bugs that get separated out into the wooden filter. V'hadar nafil likasa, and then can end up falling into the cup or whatever receptacle is holding the filtered beer. V'avi over mishum sheretz hashoretz al haaretz, and that bug that lands in the beer would actually be an issue of sheretz hashoretz al haaretz at this time, because it had initially crawled around when it got filtered out. Yachi, if that's the case, bimana nami. But one second, if that's the case, shouldn't we also be concerned when you're drinking a glass of water? What's the concern? Well, dimaparish lidafna dimana. What if you have a glass of water, a bottle of water, whatever it is, and there's some bugs and stuff in that water? We said that these bugs that originate in the water, they are okay. But what if it hit the side of what if it got, it was hanging out on the side of the bottle and was crawling around on the side of the bottle? And then falls back into the water. So shouldn't we be concerned also about sheretz hashoretz al haaretz now? So awesome, hainu revise. So no, that's different, because if you have these bugs that are crawling around the side of the bottle, that is its environment. That is where it belongs, and it would not be considered sheretz hashoretz al haaretz. Umina temra. And how do we know this? The Tanya we learn in the Brisa, Minayin l'rabos boris shichin umeoros sheshoche v'shose mein beino nimna. How do we know that you can drink from pits, ditches, caves, and there's no problem? Just bend down and enjoy pit, ditch, and cave water. Talmud Omer, tochlu mikol asher b'moim, because the pasuk says, eat from whatever that you can eat from whatever might be in that water. But shouldn't we be concerned? How could you drink from the pit, the ditch, the cave? What if some of those bugs that you may be consuming got on the side of the pit or cave or ditch, whatever, and then ended up in the water? Ella, hainu revise, no, whatever may have gotten on the sides and then fallen in is kind of the environment in which it belongs, and it never left its kind of environs where it belongs, and therefore it's okay. Achinami here also in our glass or a water bottle, hainu revise, it remained in the environment in which it belongs, and therefore it is okay. Amalei Rav Chizda Rav Huna, says Rav Chizda to Rav Huna, Tani d'misayelach, I have a brisa that supports you about the filtering out of the bugs. Kol hasheretz hashoretz al haaretz lirabos yavchushin, to include in the prohibition gnats like mosquitoes shesinanon, that have been filtered out. Time of the sinanon, the reason why they're problematic is because they've been filtered out. Halo sinanon shari, but if they were not filtered out and just remained as part of whatever you were drinking, so then they would be okay. But once they get filtered out, there's a concern, there's an issue of sheretz hashoretz al haaretz. Friends, we're now moving on to bugs in fruits and vegetables. Amar Shmuel says, Shmuel, kishus, cucumbers, she'esliya, that they got buggy. be'ibel, when it was still connected to the cucumber plant. Asura, not allowed, mishum asheretz al aretz, at concern of land-based sheretzes. So long as the cucumber is still connected to the ground, so we're concerned about land-based sheretzes. Lem Meseele, the Gemara suggests that this could be a support for Shmuel. Tanichata, that we have one brayso that says ala aretz, that when it says sheretz ashoretz ala aretz, lehotzi, to the exclusion of azizin sheba'adashim, any, I think there are bugs, mosquitoes that may be found in lentils. Besai yetushim she beklisim, or any mosquitoes that might be, or gnats that might be in arbis, chickpeas. Vitolas shebetmarim, or any worms that are in dates. Shebegrodris, or in dried figs. So here we're saying, right, lehotzi, right, these things, there's no issue. There's no issue of these bugs that we just listed. V'tani idach, we have another brayse that says called asheretz al aretz livrabos, to include tolas shebeikre zeisim, worms that are in the branch, in the what's the word I'm thinking of? Not the roots, not the branch, stems, I think. In the stem, maybe, in like the plant of the, I guess olives, yeah, I guess the stems of the olives, I think. Or the stems of the grapes. So my love, so let's say the following. Let's say that they're both, that all of these are talking about the actual fruits. So how come in the ratio we're saying that there's no issue with these bugs, and in the sefer we're saying that there is an issue with the bugs? Let's say that the difference between the two is that the sefer, where there is an issue, is talking about when it's still connected to the ground. The ratio, when it says there's no issue, it's talking about where the fruits are disconnected from the ground, and that would be a support for Shmuel, who says that when you have the cucumbers that are still connected to the ground, there is an issue with their bugs. No. We can argue that both the Reisha and, well, not the Reisha and the Sefer, but the first brayso and the second brayso are talking about where the fruit is still connected to the ground. Kasha, and we can resolve the difference in the following way: ha bepeira ha beilna gufa. That if we're talking about the fruit, there is no concern about these bugs. If we're talking about the tree itself, then there is a concern about the bugs. Daikanami, we can also infer the katani that it says tolas shebeikre zeisim shebeikre gifanim shmamina. It says that if it's in like the root, in the actual I guess olive tree or grape vines, so therefore we see it's about the tree itself. But we can argue that the brayso that says that all these fruits are permitted is because we're talking about the bug is found in the fruit, even if they're still connected to the ground. So therefore, Shmuel had said that if you have a cucumber that is still connected to the ground and it has bugs in it, you cannot eat it because it's still connected to the ground. However, we have this brayso that says that you can eat all these different bugs that are found in these different fruits, and we wanted to argue that it could be, even if they are connected to the ground, you still can eat them, in which case it would not be a support for Shmuel. Now, a few kind of technical scenarios. Rav Yosef asks, Persha v'mesa mau. What if you have a bug that's in let's say you have a date, okay? And the date is disconnected from the ground. It's not connected to the ground. And there are bugs that originated in that date. So everyone would agree in that case, if it's disconnected from the ground, and the bug originated in the date, you can eat it, enjoy it. But what happens in a scenario, and all, we're going to have 6 kind of teku scenarios right now. All of them are regarding this context. A fruit, a date, or whatever it might be, we'll use the date as an example, that was disconnected from the ground and a bug developed in it. In and of itself, that is okay. Because it's not sheretz ala aretz, it's in the fruit. And it never was on the ground. And it originated in the fruit and never left the fruit. Now what happens, Persha v'mesa? What happens if the bug exited the fruit, fell off the fruit, landed on the ground, broke its neck, it was a terrible tragedy, and it's dead? It fell on the ground but never had an opportunity to actually walk on the ground. So on the one end, it never walked on the ground, so it's not really sheretz hasharetz on ala aretz, but it did kind of fall onto the ground and it would have walked around. So what do we say there? Miktsasamo, what if we have like a big, long gishmaka, like worm or centipede or something comes exiting out of the date that you're about to enjoy, and it's now partially still in the date and partially out of the date and on the ground or whatever. So what happens in that scenario? Lavria olamo, what happens if you have a bug that falls off of a date? Let's say the date is on the table, the bug falls out of the date, and before it has an opportunity to land on the ground and run away, you open up your mouth and look up, and with proper mouth bug coordination, that bug lands right in your trap. So on the one hand, it never hit the ground. On the other hand, it would have hit the ground and hit the ground running. So now what? Take it, we say it's a tie. But Rav Ashi asks, Ligag tomorrow Mao, what if the bug like got to the top of the date, right? So you have a bug like in a date and it went to the very, went outside on the top of the date but never went down to the ground. Mao. Ligagar ine garinosamao. And what about if it goes to the top of the pit, the pit that's in the date? Tomorrow Mao. What if it kind of like eats its way through the side of the date into the adjacent date without ever having left the date? Mao. Teku. It's a tie. Okay, and now we wrap up Perek Elu Trefis with a discussion about bugs in meat and fish. Omar Rav Sheshes Brei Rav Idi says Rav Sheshes Brei Rav Idi Kokiani, bugs that get into animal lungs and liver. Can you imagine? You want to eat chopped liver and there is bugs in it. Chaval, but not to worry, maybe you can eat them. Let's see. If you can eat them, then it's geferlich, right? Asire, we say, however, it's geferlich, it is osur. My time outcome, me'alma also, because they didn't originate in the animal, they were consumed, they somehow got into the body from the outside world, and therefore they are sheretz asharetz al ha'aretz. Maskiv la Rav Ashi asks, also if they were ingested, lishtakhu derech beisarei, then they should be identifiable in the digestive tract. They should be found in the digestive tract if they were consumed from outside of the outside world. Those who say Rav Shisha Ber Davidi says of Shisha Ber Davidi Kokiani Sharu, that actually bugs in liver and lungs are permitted. My time outcome mine gavle, because they are developed inside of the animal itself. That's why they are permitted. They are not coming from the outside. Rav Ashi says of Ashi Pshita, that is obvious. Di me'almo kasu, because if they came from outside of the animal, lishtakhu derech beisarei, then we should be able to find them in the digestive tract. Rather, it must be that they developed inside of the it must be that they developed inside of the animal, which is why they are identifiable in the lung and the liver. However, the halacha is kokiani, when it comes to these animal bugs, asire, they are also my time outcome meinam naim va'ailila beusye tola zeu. That when the animal was sleeping, these sneaky little bugs crawled into the animal's schnaz, and that is how the bugs got into the lungs and into the liver, and that is sheesh. Wow. What a way to end Elu Trefis. Throwback to like lungs and breathing stuff in and going through the bronchioles and through the veins into the liver. So all right, so it came from the outside world, and therefore these bugs are osur. So if you find a bug in your chopped liver, as much as I'm sure you would love to eat it, I'm sorry, you must throw it in the garbage. Tolaim, when it comes to worms, darne de bisra, we're talking about these worms that are found in meat, asire, osur. The kavre sharim, if we're talking about bugs and worms in fish, they're okay. Ravina said to his mother, Ravina wanted to be a good eater, he didn't want to be a picky eater. And if there would be these bugs these worms found in the fish, he said, you know what? He said to his mother, I'll eat it. You don't have to throw it out. I'll eat it, but I don't want to see it. So just hide the wormy fish, hide it among some of the non-wormy fish, so I won't realize that I'm eating it. That's a good boy. So Amar le Ravina said to his mother, Avla li, just hide it amongst the other fish, Ve'ana eicho, and then I'll eat it hopefully without realizing it. I don't really want to look at the worms while I'm eating them. Only of Mishasha Breder of Achlu Ravina says of Mishasha Breder of Achlu Ravina, Maishna Meodatanya, why are fish different than that which we learn in the Brisa Ves Nivlosim Tishaketsu? Did I read that correctly? Yes. Lirabos es dironim shebebehema, that includes worms in animals. Why are worms in fish permitted while worms in animals are not? Well, I'll tell you what. An animal, you have to do a proper shchita in order to permit the meat to be eaten. And there are these bugs in the animal that there are these worms in the animal that you're not allowed to eat. So while shchita will permit the meat to be eaten, it won't permit these worms to be eaten. Right? Because the shchita doesn't work for worms. There is no shchita for worms. Aval dogim, when it comes to fish, there is no shchita for fish. You just, ba'asifam ba'alma mystery. You gather them up and you eat them. And therefore these fish, when you are, I don't remember what gavlin means, but essentially eating them, does Rashi say? I don't think that he does. But when it comes to these fish, it is essentially right. So Rashi says that these worms that are growing in the fish, they essentially, because they're growing and developing in the fish, they're like a type of Aver Menachai. So, however, when it comes to fish, you don't actually have to do a shchita or anything like that. You just gather them and you can eat them, and whatever worms were in them would be just considered like the rest of the fish, and they are acceptable. You don't need any kind of proper shchita for anything like that. When it comes to fish, you're just basically killing it and eating it. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught holich al gochon. Right, this is a reference to the pasuk that says kol holich al gochon, v'kol holich al arba, ad kol ma'ber aglaim, etc. So we're going to darshan that pasuk holich al gochin when it comes to a sheretz that crawls on its belly, zenochish, that's a snake. Kol, the rabbi says shilshul, that comes to include a shilshul. What's a shilshul? What is a shilshul? An earthworm. Vesadom the shilshul, and anything similar to shilshul. Ala oretz ze akrav, that on the ground, that is a what's an akrav? Scary thing, akrav. Akrav is a scary thing. Who can tell me what an akrav is? Akrav. Oof. Oh, come on. What's an akrav? Who can tell me what an akrav is? Come on, yell it louder. I don't hear you. Oh, dude, it's one of those things in the desert that are really scary. Oh man, what are those things? Come on, louder. Hilla, you're only a few blocks away. Just yell a little louder. Those things, they're like really scary. They have they're like small, and they have these long tails, and then they sting you or do something to you. Oh, come on. Scorpion. Yeah, scary stuff. Okay, where are we? Okay, I was the akrav. Kol holech, anything that walks, l'rabos es achipushis, to include a beetle, v'sadom l'chipushis, or anything similar to beetle, ma'ber aglaim zenadol, that's a centipede. Ad kol l'rabos es adom v'sadom l'dome, including anything similar to centipedes, or even similar to centipedes. Don't eat bugs, I guess. Tanya Rabbi Yosef in Damascus, almost says Yosef in Damascus, Livyason, the great Leviathan, the great fish of the future, of the time of Mashiach, I imagine. Dog Tar, it is a kosher fish. Shenemar, as Babble says, Gaiva afike maginim tachtov chadude cheres. Afike maginim elu kasim shebo. Chadude, where the afike maginim is a reference to the scales that protect the Livyason. Tachtov chadude cheres, and below it are these like shards of pottery. Elu snapirin shepoech ben, that is the fins that it navigates with. So the Livioson as fins and scales. Hadron Olach Elu Chefis Chever. We did it, friends. On Daf 67, Daf Samach Zayin of Masechta Chullin, we of course wrapped up the third parak of Elu Chefis, which is also pretty amazing because the first three prakim, as I've said, of Masechta Chullin are pretty much half of the Masechta. We're within the next few days, we will be halfway through Masechta Chullin, which is unbelievable. This is one of the longest Masechtas in Shas. In my estimation, it's the third, in my kind of calculation, it's the third longest Masechta in Shas, after Shabbos and Bava Basra, I think. So it's a big one. We're almost halfway through. I think it's been a great one. Honestly, in some crazy way, it's been like almost like a break after Zvachim and Menachis. Honestly, after Zvachim and Menachis, I think Chulin, as difficult as it's been, has actually been like quite pleasant. Anyways, I think after this, we're going to get back to some Kodshim stuff after Chulin HaKoponim. So, okay, the first part of today, we talked about bugs in static water, which was really a continuation of the discussion from yesterday. We had said the bugs in static water are okay when they are born in the water and stay in the water. However, they are not okay once it crawls out onto the ground, because then it becomes an issue of sheretz, ashoretz, ala aretz. We discussed bugs in fruits and vegetables. It's not okay when the fruit and vegetables are still connected to the ground. It is okay when the fruits and vegetables are no longer connected to the ground and the bugs then develop in that fruit that's disconnected from the ground. It's okay until it crawls out of the fruit and vegetable, then it becomes an issue. And finally, bugs in meat and fish. We said it's not okay in meat because while you could check the meat, you can't check any of these bugs. But in terms of fish, it's all right because there's no shechita for fish. You just collect the fish and whatever's in the fish you can enjoy. So, friends, that was Daf Samach Zayin of Masechta Chulin. Hope you enjoyed. Cheers.